And I think it finds itself or expresses itself in I guess they call it integrated deterrence now. A couple of years ago, it was cross-domain deterrence. But again, in the National Defense Strategy, it says the Defense Department will employ integrated deterrence using a tailored combination of conventional cyberspace and information capabilities along with nuclear weapons. Now, for a space-centric person like me, I read it as, hey, if there is an attack on our assets in space, we can use whatever domain we want to retaliate. And that has a little bit of defense. In 2010, the Director of Space Policy and Strategy Development and the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy wrote in an editorial, hey, retaliation for an attack on space systems need not and should not be limited to military actions in the space domain. Uh, that should give us a little bit of pause, because in this avenue, if an attack in space happens, an attack on Earth is not, or a retaliation on Earth is not just, possible, but maybe likely. And if we follow, next slide, if we follow sanctuary thinking a little bit deeper, it could include nuclear weapons. So just to explain what I would say is, the sanctuary's truths of space warfare is that space warfare is generally considered unthinkable, mostly because there's the fear of rapid, uncontrollable escalation, which could include nuclear escalation, or at least nuclear retaliation. Other nuclear concepts that have been brought in are first strike stability in space, essential for deterrence. But I would go a little bit farther because, in nuclear, deterrence theory, stability is paramount. So this sanctuary school sort of stresses, stability in space as well. Unfortunately, the domain itself is extraordinarily dynamic and changing. But that dynamism is discouraged, at least in policy, because we don't really want to think about it. We want to make sure that the status quo in space remains. And other people start to argue from sanctuary, starting points that space is an offensive dominant domain, which means there's advantages to shooting first, maybe even insurmountable advantages to striking first. But also, because there's no stick in space, no space weapons to deter against space warfare, integrated deterrence is necessary to provide that force for retaliation and to incite fear in the adversary, which I would argue might well be a self-fulfilling prophecy, in that if the original sanctuary school said space warfare is undesirable and unthinkable because it could lead to nuclear war, this new approach of cross-domain deterrence and integrated deterrence might well cause unchecked escalation after a space attack, because there's no other alternative available to it. Next slide. Because as we all know, or at least I'm going to argue, mutually assured destruction is a doctrine that hopes to avoid war by fear of catastrophic retaliation. That is what the sanctuary school offers for deterring warfare in space. So how do we deal with that?